Okay, for your polar graphing project, you're going to create a design using some polar graphs. Here's just one example. As you can see, this design has about 17 different equations, several different forms in here. There's some limacins, there's some rose curves, some variations on the rose curve, there's some circles in there. So meeting the criteria that was set, which remember your criteria is you have to have a minimum of 7 equations and you have to have a minimum of 3 different types of equations. So this one is a second example. This one has 8 different equations in it. Again, several different types. We've got some circles. We've got some variations on the rose curve. This graph here is a graph that's using the secant function. This design also uses some inequalities to get some shading options going on too. So that's an option for you that I will explain a little bit later. Okay, to start your polar graphing project, you're just going to go to Desmos and do the Start Graphing option. So just click the red button in the middle that says Start Graphing. That will take you to sort of your blank graphing screen. What you want to do is change into polar mode. So you're going to come over here to the wrench, which is your graph settings, and you're going to, here in the grid area, you're going to change from the rectangular grid to the polar grid. I would recommend working in radians. It's just a little bit easier to graph. Your numbers are a little bit smaller, so I would recommend that. You can turn on and off your grids and your axes, so it's just kind of up to you. I would probably leave them on as you're working just so that you have a sense of your numbers, and then maybe at the end you could turn them off. But if you want to turn your grid off, you're just going to check off the grid, and then you can check off your x-axis and your y-axis if you just want to work with your blank screen. Again, I'm going to turn them back on for right now just for our demonstration purposes. Once you have changed to the polar grid, you can just click the wrench again and that will get rid of that box for you, so it's out of your way. So remember, you're going to create a design that has a minimum of 7 different equations in it and a minimum of 3 different types of equations. So I'm just going to start with just a simple circle. So I'm just going to do like maybe r equals 6 and get a circle. I'm going to do just your basic rose curve. So I'm going to do r equals, again, I'm going to go 6 cosine for theta. So to get your theta in there, you're just going to type the word theta, so theta, and it'll switch it over to the actual symbol for theta. I'm going to put a third equation in there that's just a simple spiral, so I'm just going to do r equals theta and get a spiral in there. For some of them, you may want to play around with the coefficients, and if you're not sure what value you want, remember you can put in a variable. So I'm just going to put a variable in there for a. And then you can just sort of mess around with the slider to see like what value is really going to work for you. So feel free to use those sliders. On the spiral, notice that as I changed the coefficient value, it sort of stopped at a particular place, and maybe I wanted that to continue. So that's just going to be a matter of changing your domain. So this spiral is going from 0 to 12 pi. So if I want it to go further, maybe I'll type in 24 pi, and then you can see it's going out further. I can also change the lower bound and make that maybe negative 24 pi, and then you can see your spirals going in both directions. Okay, we've got some color options that we can work with here. So there's 2 things that you can do. The first is you can change the color of your individual curves. So if you come up here to the edit list option, sort of a little gear up here, you can see the dots then, which are next to your equations. And then if you click on one of those dots, you've got some line style options. So you can change your line style, and then you can change your color. Once you're finished with that, just click the Done button, and then it'll kind of return you back to being able to edit your equations. Another option that you can look at for your color options is to come over here again to your graph settings, and you can do reverse color contrast, which makes your background black and then changes your colors a little bit over here. So you still just have the 6 colors that you can work with and the 3 different line styles, but it gives you just a different option to look at. Completely up to you, whichever one you prefer to do. One other thing that you can do is instead of doing an equation, you can do an inequality. Okay, so if I change this to a less than, then you can see that you get some shading inside your curve here. You did lose some of your petals here because of the inequality, but if you want the solid line outlining that curve, then you can just add the or equal to onto that inequality. So just type the equal sign after that, and then you'll get your solid line line back. So it's just following the rules of inequalities, that if it's a strict inequality, your boundary is a dashed line. And if it's a bounded inequality, so if it contains the or equal to, then it's going to be a solid line. Okay, so you are limited with colors in here. There's only 6 colors, but one thing that you can do if you want to kind of create some different colors is you can do some layering. So here what I did is I just created the same equation twice. So r is less than or equal to 6 cosine of 4 theta. And then I did one in green and one in pink. So if I turn the pink one off, you can see with just the green shading. If I turn both of them off and just turn the pink one on, so then you can see what it looks like with the pink shading. And then if I turn both of them on, you get a slightly different color there. So if you really want to work with your colors, you can work kind of layering those colors on top of each other. Okay, so once you have your design completed the way you want it, there's 2 options that you can use in order to turn your graph into me. So the first is that you can save your graph. So up here you can see there's an untitled graph option and there's a save option. So you can actually save your graphs, but in order to do that, you have to create an account. Now the account is free and you just are going to use your email address to create it. So some of you may not want to do that, and that's fine. We'll come to plan B in just a second. But if you want to save your graph, you can just come here and title it, then just click the save button and your graph is saved. So if you're going to do that, remember, go ahead and set up the account kind of before you get started, and then you can start saving it along the way. This also would give you the ability to leave and come back on a different day and sort of work on it a little bit later. If you do that, then once you have saved it and you're completely finished with it, you can come over here to the share graph option, copy the link, then go to the OneNote page that is the Polar Graphing Project submission. You can just paste the link there and your design will actually insert in there along with the link to it. If you do not want to create the account and save your graph that way, then once you have your graph saved, you're going to just snip the graph and you're going to put it on a page in your OneNote. I'll distribute that page to you. And then also you're going to come over here and you're going to snip your equations. If you have more equations that fit in this area over here, then you'll just have to like snip a couple times. So remember, you're looking for 7 different equations and 3 different types of equations. Once you have left Desmos, if you want to come back and you want to work on your graph again, just come back into Desmos like you would normally would, where you went to desmos.com and clicked the red Start Graphing button. Then you're just going to come over here to these 3 lines. Once you click on the 3 lines, then you can get a list of your saved graphs, and then you can pull that graph back up. So that way, if you've left and you want to come back and do some work on it, then you can reload that graph. All right, then one final thing is if you come over here, if you have worked on your graph and you're really proud of it, there is a global math art contest that you can submit your design to. So just click on this button and then you can click here to submit your graph.